Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify a few things here. When Chief Barnes was up here talking, he said that they were going to be a placeholder, and by that, for funds for the city. So that didn't necessarily mean that the full $400,000 was going to be going to the homeless. And Mary Ann did, I guess, say that was correct as well, that if there was an invoice coming through that was needed to be paid that was emergent, for example, for motor pool that we didn't expect to come in until 2026, some of those funds could be diverted back to motor pool. So is this going to be a placeholder, or is that full $400,000 going to be for the homeless?
Oh, so first of all, we haven't received all of our billing from Catholic Charities. So, this was an estimate. So once we get that billing, we'll know the exact amount. So that's why this is up to 400,000. So it wouldn't, like if we get more billing, it could be less than 400,000 because we have not received all of our invoices from Catholic Charities. Then we will report this on our December 31st, 2024 report to the federal government as an obligation for whatever that balance is once we get those Catholic Charities invoices. And that will be what we've committed to. If we know we have money today for, let's say, once we get the final invoices, like we're waiting for some final invoices for corrosion control, things like that, we will determine if there's any money that we can show is related to motor pool. And then the Fed rules say that once we've obligated the funds, we can do change orders, we can modify our allocations during that 2-year period of time. But if we haven't obligated it by December 31st of 2024, we can't. So when I was talking to the auditors, an obligation is not a spend, right? So we are reporting 2 numbers to the feds every quarter: what's obligated and what has been spent. So if we get to the end of 2025, and finance is still going to get these monitoring ARPA reports that I've been sending out, about monthly to finance. So if we get to the last quarter of 2025 and we see, as I used as an example, for a firefighter position or some of these engineering contracts, if we recognize that the work is done, or let's say we have some vacancies, we will show that change in the fourth quarter to adjust our estimate, or because in payroll it's called an estimate, in contracts it's called an obligation. We'll adjust the obligation to the correct amount, and then we will also adjust the obligation for motor pool. So if, for example, we have an engineering contract where we have $50,000 extra, we would make that change at that time, and we would go and look at what purchase orders we have outstanding that were issued prior to December 31st, 2024 that have the ARPA coding on them, because we've been coding them as ARPA-related purchase orders. And if we've made a payment on that, we will then insert that as our payment for the year and show an adjustment to the estimate down for a position or for a contract and say it's no longer obligated. Because some of these contracts, for example, corrosion control, have a deadline within that 2025 to 2026 period. So in my conversations with our auditors, that was their recommendation of how to handle these modifications. And we can then, if you see, for example, we can bring this back. You can amend the contract anytime after, just like we have been for Catholic Charities. If we find something and we want to amend the contract, we can amend the contract during that time. It's really just getting this contract in place by December 31st so that we've got it obligated. Because once we get beyond that, we can't do anything anymore with this. We can't resurrect it after that because we didn't have a contract in place. They allow you to modify a contract. They allow you, let's say, another example that they've used is when we were looking at these housing projects. If we had signed a contract with a housing and they said after the 12/31/2024 period, they went bankrupt or they couldn't perform the work, we would be able to find a replacement during that 2-year period. But we have to have the contract in place. And we've already received notice from Catholic Charities that they're not going to sign that 2025 extension. So we had to do it now. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but so we don't really know if that's going to be 400,000.
Right.
Depending on what
we have
happens.
not to exceed 400,000
Now, my other question then is, this money someplace.
to
or
Catholic Charities.
right? That was 32,000. But the rest of that was already allocated to motor pool, and we're pulling that back from there, correct?
Well, it was allocated to Catholic Charities, and then we were going to do this $32,000. And yes, you're correct. Then when we were looking at this and when we were only going to give Catholic Charities $32,000, we said, okay, motor pool will take up the balance of this. That's why we've signed all of these purchase orders and made the allocation for motor pool, because it's hard to anticipate all of the changes, all the dynamics that are going to take place in this 2-year period.
Correct. So my point is that everybody's making it sound like we use it or we lose it, and that's not the case. We had already allocated that to motor
Correct.
pool. We were never going to lose this
Correct.
400,000.
That's true. That is
Okay.
true.
Just 32 potentially, but the 400,000, no, that's been.
Right.
Right, what I'm saying is the 32
Yeah.
was allocated to the
Yes.
police department. The rest of that, we had allocated previously to
Yes.
motor pool. So when people come up here or say, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it, that's not correct,
Right.
okay?
Yeah,
So
and you wouldn't have to, I mean, I don't want to complicate matters, but you wouldn't have to do the whole 400,000. If you said, we only want to allocate 200, you could do that.
Right.
And then motor pool would pick up the rest of it.
What I'm doing is clarifying so that this is transparent, so
Mm-hmm. Sure.
people don't think, oh my God, if we didn't use it, we would have lost it. Well, that's not the case.
Sure.
Okay.
But
And-
we would lose it for homelessness. I think that's what the point Matt was trying to make.
Right.
And I think he made that pretty clearly, like, if you want to provide homelessness services and you don't use these ARPA funds, you're going to either have to use reserves or you're going to have to find another revenue source.
Right, but we're going to have to use reserves or another revenue source for that money that we're taking from motor pool over to
Correct.
homelessness
Yes.
anyhow. So it's not like we're ahead.
Right.
We're not, we're just switching it from one place to the other.
Exactly.
Either way, we would have had to put funding into one or the
Yep.
other. So
Exactly
we're not
right.
really ahead, it's just a shift of funds.
Yep.
And because there were several points that mentioned, we don't want to give this back to the feds.
Oh.
We were never going to give this back to
Right.
the feds. Okay, so